Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to round 7 of the Strawberry.com Formula Alpha Championship. We're here in Melbourne this evening. It's just the end of qualifying now. The timer has hit 0, but I can tell you the order. It is Will Inglis, Alex Smith, Matt Daly, Steve Knight and Paul Millman rounding out the running in qualifying. So it'll be Will Inglis versus Alex Smith on the front row, Matt Daly in P3, then Steve Knight and Paul Millman on the second and third row as well. We're watching here Matt and Daly heading back into the pits as we get ready for the first race of this evening, so don't go anywhere. So here we are on the grid, ladies and gentlemen. I can actually see on my timing system people deploying DRS already. Not usually recommended for the launch, but any tactic you might want to try could work. You never know. Melbourne, of course, an infamous single-seater circuit used on the Formula 1 Formula 1 calendar. This loop around Albert Park. Just over a minute to go until lights out now, and as I say, it is Will Inglis and Alex Smith who will be fighting out on the front row of the grid. Watch out though for Matt Daly and I think as well Paul Millman as well. Could be in for a great battle with Steve Knight here. With such a small grid, it's all to play for really into this first corner. So yeah, all drivers are going to have their wits about them. In terms of the tyres, we have the C2 and the C3 tyres in usage here. So Paul Millman going a little bit of an outlier in terms of the strategy. Most other drivers opting for that C2 tyre, which has been a bit of a favourite so far this season. Actually, it seems to primarily be a mix of the C2 and the C3, because of course, while these are by no means short races, they're not the longest races. They're not the type of length that these cars will usually be expected to complete. So the slightly harder compounded tyre, while not the hardest that we offer, of course, will see us through comfortably. It is only now 5 seconds until it lights out, so here we go. It's 6 red lights on the gantry, and we are away for 25 minutes of racing here in Melbourne. Wheel spin off the line for Will Inglis. That allows Alex Smith to swoop past and into the lead, up the inside, into the first corner. Comfortable lead there. Matt Daly actually making contact with Will Inglis, so Will Inglis doing well to keep the car straight and level, and no major issues there. See Will Inglis now darting to the inside of the first corner. I believe there was contact there. They have got away with it though, and Will Inglis now under pressure from Matt Daly. Matt Daly for a second looked like he was under threat from Paul Millman. That is Will Inglis, who's gone too deep into the corner, taken too much out of it, has gone into the grass, and of course the grass has no grip there. It spits you off, and that is Will Inglis pretty much out of this race before it's even really begun. Great shame for Will Inglis there. Here is, though, Matt Daly under pressure from Paul Millman here. Paul Millman having a look around the outside. Nowhere he can get past just yet. We saw here just a few weeks ago, it was Carlos Sainz versus Max Verstappen. Now it's going to be Paul Millman versus Matt Daly. Matt Daly having to defend here from Paul Millman. Paul Millman looking stronger on this first lap than the inside available to him, but he isn't able to take it back from there. And here is Steve Knight out of nowhere, now putting pressure on Paul Millman. He's been able to keep up, has kept the nose clean, of course. All of this chaos going on at the start of the lap has allowed him to, despite a slow launch, stay in the mix of things here. Is that Matt Daly into the pits? It is Matt Daly into the pits. That's going to make things interesting, ladies and gentlemen, as he is now going to be very much on the back foot, just like Will Inglis, actually. All of this is allowing Alex Smith to rather walk away with it, it must be said. He's in the lead of this race and is a good straight away. Yeah, 5 seconds, there we are. Two closest cars on track is Paul Millman and Steve Knight here as we head deeper into this first sector. Now, Matt Daly does leave the pit. I'm not sure why he had to pit, actually. I'm not sure if there was mechanical damage, if he had to serve a penalty. I suspect it could well have been a penalty from a premature start at the beginning of the race. If he's rolled too much in his pit box, Assetto Corsa gives you no leeway on that at all. So sorry, Lando Norris, you wouldn't get away with it here. Yes, no leeway at all in Assetto Corsa. If the car moves, that is it. You've got to drive through to serve, and it looks to be that that's what Matt Daly's had to do. It's allowed him to fall a little bit more back towards Will Inglis, is what I was about to say. However, Will Inglis has had to dive into the pits himself. So two very fast drivers in this race. This is going to get interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Two very fast drivers now find themselves 30 seconds down on the rest of the field. In fact, you could argue two of our fastest drivers, apart from Alex Smith, who's looked oh so comfortable in this car so far this year. So our mid-pack battle is now made up of Paul Millman and Steve Knight. We just saw on Paul Millman's car there as we were coming through that final corner. That final corner, a very unforgiving corner on the circuit. If you've played the F1 EA game, formerly Codemasters of course, as well as driven F1 machinery in Assetto Corsa, you will know just how nasty that final corner is. It is a symphony of understeer, that last corner complex for the start-finish straight here at Albert Park. And we could see it then in Paul Millman's car, the front axle just not responding the way that he would have wanted. There has been contact between Steve Knight and Paul Millman. That has resulted in Steve Knight dropping into the gravel. So unfortunately, this little battle has come to a bit of an end here. Let's see what Steve Knight can do in terms of catching back up and continuing on this fight. We're only a few minutes into this race, and already Alex Smith with the DRS is now 8 seconds into the lead. That last lap was 121.2. compared to 123s, low 123s for the rest of the field, and actually 25s, 26s for the drivers at the back, because of course they have to dive into the pits on their last lap. They're not going to get a representative lap time in until the third lap of the race, if they can keep the nose clean. Will Inglis has now got back underway. Is a minute down as well, so Alex Smith currently leading by about 8 seconds. The gap between Paul Millman and Steve Knight remains at about 2 seconds on there, heading now through that final part of the lap that we've just been talking about. Alex Smith still in the DRS, but looking that is because he is on that start-finish straight. He's enjoyed plenty of DRS. There are quite a few DRS zones. The percentage of the track that is under DRS here is quite extraordinary, actually, as Steve Knight has had another collision with the environment there, as it is so called on the timing system. You can follow along on the timing, by the way, with aroc2.emperorservers.com. So that is aroc2.emperorservers.com, and then you go to the live event there, and you can see what we are seeing in terms of mini sectors, in terms of where the drivers are on track and their lap times as well. Steve Knight looks to be struggling with that car a little bit now. You can see on the damage board he is losing his front and rear wing. So that car is not going to be enjoyable to drive for the remaining 20 minutes of this race. Alex Smith in the middle of setting his purple sectors. Paul Millman's had an issue. No, he hasn't. That was just a timing glitch. But Alex Smith is in the middle of setting purple sector after purple sector. He wants to keep up this pace on, but wants to make sure he keeps the nose clean, of course. Last time we had a driver named Alex get it a little bit wrong at Melbourne. It was for points, and by the looks of things, of course, we'll all be scoring points this evening. But he'd want to make sure he keeps the nose clean, doesn't allow any silly errors in. As I say, purple through the first sector, personal best through the second. Matt Daly is still setting purple sectors as well. Just a shame he is quite a ways back, about 30 seconds down on the lead of this race, but closing up on the likes of Steve Knight and Paul Millman. He is about, at this moment in time, about 3 to 7 seconds faster based on who you ask. Against Paul Millman, he's 3 seconds a lap faster. Against Steve Knight, he's about 7 seconds a lap faster. So Matt Daly, despite that early pit, and we have a pit there for Steve Knight, Matt Daly very much in the mix here. I'm starting to wonder if we had pretty much everyone jumping the start of the race, or if there's been a glitch with the system and everyone's having to dive into the pits. Odd one, that is for sure, but that now promotes Matt Daly up into 3rd position on this race, and Matt Daly, perhaps unsurprisingly, has quickly found himself back into a podium scoring position. And that boosts Alex Smith's lead in this race now about 14 seconds. 14 seconds clear of Paul Millman. Paul Millman himself has 14 seconds until he needs to worry about any cars behind him. He is very much in control of this race at the moment, is Alex Smith, and in control as well in the championship. Let's have a look at how the championship is shaping up, and it is going Alex Smith's way, that is for sure. It's 191 points to his name as Matt Daly actually disconnects from the server. That is big news there. I was just about to say, it's at this stage of the championship, just past the halfway mark, and Matt Daly really needs to start getting those wins in order to try and fight against Alex Smith. It's 129 points to Matt Daly's name compared to Alex Smith's 191. You have to say early on it's looking like this is going to be victory for Alex. And yeah, there we go. 70 points he's in the lead, and he'll take away an extended lead into race 2 this evening. Because, yeah, a DNF from Matt Daly. So it is Matt Daly then in P2. Then we have Jack Olson P3, Andrew Rammer P4, Willie Bliss P5. So he should jump up a fair ways in the championship standings at least. And then we've got Paul Millman P6, Steve Knight P7. And then that is pretty much it for the regular attendees for the Formula Alpha running now in the second half of this season. Alex Smith still deploying that DRS, still trying to gain every single tenth of a second that he can, and leading this race in a very strong manner indeed. Will Inglis, I should mention, is still looking fast. He's the second fastest car out on track at the moment. He is a minute down, so he's got his work cut out for him. He's about 10 to 14 seconds down on Steve Knight at this point. Lost a lot of time through that final second, but is still about 5 seconds quicker on that last lap. Steve Knight looks to be struggling with the car now, so Will Inglis still in the fight here for another podium at Melbourne. And here we see now that that gap between Steve Knight and Will Inglis is closing down. On that last lap, we we do have a 126.9 for Steve Knight and a 120.8 for Will Inglis. Now, I should mention, Steve Knight has gone for a very bold strategy choice here. He had that early pit stop, of course, and he opted for the C5 tyre in the pits. Now, whether or not he opted for that on purpose, or whether what is so easy to do in Assetto, the pit stop strategy was set up wrong and perhaps was set up for qualifying, and he ended up on the C5 tyre that way. Either way, he will have had immense pace early on in this stint, but very quickly with the C5 tyre, and especially the high-speed corners involved at Albert Park, will have found himself now struggling with the car. Because here is Will Inglis around the outside there. Brilliant move by Will into the middle sector now, and it's Will Inglis up into third place, and that is unsurprising given, that C5 tyre not going to last long. Albert Park, as we say, some very high-engine, high-speed corners. These two corners here that we're heading through now as we run into the third sector. Also, the final part of the lap builds a lot of heat into the tyres, and the C5, that soft compound, is going to maintain that heat, and it's going to be brilliant for grip levels early on, but that compound is going to wear away fast and start to become just a little bit more undrivable. So unfortunately for Steve, that is not an ideal tyre to be on for what is still over half race distance to complete, and we're seeing that now. Penultimate corner there as he tries to go up the inside through that apex there. The car just does not want to do so, and he finds himself spinning round there. So it'll be a race of attrition now to the end for Steve Knight. Let's have a look at Alex Smith. We've seen Paul Milne in the backing looking a little bit upset there, but we're on board with Alex Smith, who's on the harder compound of tyre, of course. Arguably the more suitable race tyre, shall we say. And he's heading down start finish straight now. Still in the 121s, by far and away the fastest car out on track by some margin as well. Paul Milman is on a bit of a fly, though, it must be said. He's on for his personal best so far. He's heading through the final corner complex now, has made up a good 0.6 of a second so far. His last lap at 124, his best at 123.4, should be into the 22s as we come across the line in just a moment's time. It was a 123.4, so not quite the 22s, but still a good improvement nonetheless for Paul Milman. So he's looked after those tyres well. That C3 tyre, not going to be as long-lasting as the C2 that everyone else is on. Later on into the race, he may have some struggles, but around about this stage of the race, they should still have some health, some life left in them. And of course, he has the added mechanical grip coming from that softer compounder tyre. So things could be looking okay to Paul Milman at this stage in the race. He is 20 seconds off the lead, so don't forget that. But if anything was to happen up front, Paul Milman still right in the mix there to take a good result here. He's on for a good result regardless. In fact, everyone is. We've only got 4 drivers left in the running here, but either way, should be a good points finish for Paul Milman, despite the odd differences, shall we say, we have in strategy so far here this evening. And we're seeing here a big development in this race is Alex Smith serving a pit stop. Not something we often see here. Don't know if there was a penalty he had to serve. He's on the C3 tyre, so he's opted for a softer compound of tyre. What that has done, that has brought Paul Millman right back into play now with Alex Smith. 3 seconds now separate these two cars, although big difference, of course. Paul Millman on the older C3 of tyre, Alex Smith on a brand new C3 tyre. Should have plenty of grip now into the later stages of this race. That car, if it hasn't looked fast already, should be looking even faster now as we head into the final part of this race. Will Inglis then will remain as the only driver. He has actually pitted, the only driver who hasn't had to change his tyre. In fact, I think that'll be everyone has had to make at least one pit stop in this race. Perhaps bar Paul Millman. I think I'd remember given how small the grid is. Either way, Alex Smith should be looking very fast now. This lap will be an out lap, of course. It'll be a chance for these tyres to warm up. Now the fuel load is very light. We should see a representative time and just how fast he can go. Of course, we think back to qualifying where he did go very fast indeed, where he set pole position, of course, on that front row with Will Inglis. In terms of qualifying, it was actually Will Inglis, of course, who took pole position. Apologies, Will. Alex Smith came home on the C5 tyre with 119.1. And now we're going to have a chance to see a bit of a fast lap from Alex Smith. So heads into that first corner then, just clipping that inside curb there. Will Inglis has had a big off, ladies and gentlemen, towards the end of the lap. Has been able to carry on. His front wing is decimated though, so that car is not going to be enjoyable to drive for the remaining few minutes of this race. But we see now Alex Smith, that car just looking so much more alive with less fuel on board and a grippier tyre to boot. 8 seconds clear of Paul Millman, so he's already built that gap up substantially. Purple Sector 1, of course, to be expected at 26.3, when everyone else is in the 27s or 28s. He's absolutely flying along, is Alex Smith. Now up through the second highest speed part of the lap here. Apologies, the water reflections there, making Assetto struggle a little bit. Of course, that is news that some of us who will be quite happy that is news that some of us will expect, of course, with Assetto Corsa, so I imagine some of us will be quite happy to see the reveal of Assetto Corsa Evolution coming out in 2024. That should be an interesting development in the world of sim racing. There we see tyre tracks in the gravel as we head now through the final sector, the final corner complex. It's actually a slower time through the middle sector for Alex Smith, but Sector 1 was so strong, he's still looking to improve immensely as he comes across this lap now. It's a 120.4, not actually his fastest lap overall. His fastest lap still 400ths of a second faster. Maybe this lap now, the second fast lap on the C3 side, is the one to go for Alex Smith now. Just 3 minutes to go on the clock here. That outside curb on the left hand there rewards you if you ride it and kind of gun it in terms of the throttle there, but it is so easy to upset the car there. And as we head through the next corner complex, I was about to say, there is a corner that is so enticing to go far too fast through, and it puts you onto the outside of the circuit, and that is exactly what Alex Smith has just done. Maybe pushing the car just a little bit too hard now later on, and maybe what he's found is even on that one fast lap, the C3 tyre actually getting a little bit too hot to grip correctly. Just about within track limits there for Alex Smith. But yes, that Sector 1 has cost him hugely in terms of lap time here, so I don't think we're going to get a blistering C3 tyre lap time from him in the late stages of this race. He's still 15 seconds clear of Paul Millman. A very impressive drive indeed from Alex Smith, and it goes to show why not only is he leading the championship, but if we're being honest, why he will be coming home with the top prize in this championship unless anything drastic happens later on in the season. At this stage, it will pretty much take Alex Smith to no longer compete and Matt Daly to win quite a few rounds. Because, of course, after this, it's round 8 of a 12-round calendar, so there's not many rounds to go. Here we see some lap traffic now for Alex Smith in the form of Steve Knight. Alex Smith, of course, the onus is on him to overtake safely. No such thing as a blue flag in the AROC racing leagues, and he does so. He did have to go off track, actually, so I say you get the overtake safely. I'm not quite so sure it's the safest overtake in the world. It was one of the narrower parts of the circuit, of course, but he has got past at least no major collisions, which is always a good thing. go on the timer now. Just 15 seconds to go now on the timer, and it's still Alex Smith who leads this race, and he has responded to our calls for a fast lap. Sector 1, Sector 2, blistering times, both purple. He's up 1.5 seconds on his previous personal best. This should be a good one, as we are now on the penultimate lap of this race, ladies and gentlemen. One last corner to go, 45 seconds clear of anyone else on track. As comes across the line there to start the final lap. It is a 1:19.5 from Alex Smith. That's the lap that we were after, ladies and gentlemen. A blistering lap time. We've only had him 0.4 of a second down on his qualifying time, when of course the energy aren't quite turned up. Although to be fair, that is one thing we do need to think about in the Formula Alpha series. It is the energy deployment. Maybe he spent those earlier laps in the stint harvesting some energy, the ERS system up to full charge, so that he could go for a proper gun now towards the end. I imagine the car will be a little bit spent after that push, so this final lap will about just bringing the car home and bringing it home safely. Paul Millman had a bit of an off on that previous lap. That has brought him closer to Will Inglis, but still not close enough for Will Inglis's liking. It's about 10 seconds the margin between those two drivers now. As we go back aboard with Alex Smith. Really pushing the limit as he heads through those final couple of corners now, bouncing over the sausage curbs. The only driver really to keep the nose properly clean, even then it's still a couple of mistakes coming in. What has been a race of attrition, but Alex Smith weaves across the line and takes victory here in race 1 at Melbourne. Congratulations for a solid drive there, Alex. And then we have a very long wait indeed until we have Paul Millman and Will Inglis coming across the line. Paul Millman, who comes out on top, 49 seconds down from Alex Smith, but importantly for him, 10 seconds clear of Will Inglis and Steve Knight. Paul Millman, of course, starting this race all the way back in P5 at the bottom of the grid with a qualifying to forget, but that doesn't matter for him now. He's nursed those C3 tyres home for quite some distance in this race, and just has 2 more corners to negotiate now, playing it a little bit safer than Alex Smith on that final couple of corners. Still plenty of points on the cards as he heads down that start-finish straight and takes P2 in this race. Congratulations, Paul. Solid drive and a good points haul to boot as well. Steve Knight comes home classified P4, and then rounding out the podium, it will be Will Inglis coming home P3. And that is it for our field here in race 1. A very truncated field indeed. Very short running, but we do have another race for you. It's the reverse grid race, and the whole grid will be reversed coming up here at Albert Park, so don't go anywhere. And welcome back to the action, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are on the grid then for the reverse grid race, the second race here at Albert Park. And this is the order. It is Steve Knight, Will Inglis, Paul Millman and Alex Smith. Only 4 cars left in the session here. It should be an interesting one at the start, just like race 1. And the same mix of tyre compounds as well. C2s with Paul Millman on the C3s. What we'd like to see. We'd like to see him sticking with his guns, saying, you know what, I can make that work. And let's see if he can make it work again, as we have 6 red lights on the gantry. We are away for 25 minutes of racing here at Albert Park. A good getaway for Will Inglis, Paul Millman and Alex Smith as well, actually, all allowing Steve Knight past. Oh, sorry, all getting past Steve Knight there. Alex Smith side by side with Paul Millman. He has the inside, but Paul Millman actually able to carry more speed through the second corner. There's going to be a bit of a switchback here, though, I suspect, as we can see Alex Smith late on the brakes, up the inside into the third corner, and he is through and up into second place. Great move there from Alex Smith. All drivers being wary of that outside curb there through the fourth corner. That is probably wise. Let's go on board with Will Inglis, our race leader at the moment. He's under pressure, and he's under pressure from Alex Smith. That is not a comfortable position to be in. We know Alex Smith has some immense pace in this car. He's the only one, really, I'd say, this weekend who has looked properly dialed in. Not to count Will Inglis out, though he did, of course, take pole in qualifying. Here we are then. It's going to be a battle between the 2 poles here. It's something that we did not actually get to witness in race 1. We're going to get to witness it in race 2, though. The reverse grid race providing us with the action as we head into the final sector now. Actually, the top 3 staying relatively close to each other. Paul Millman doing a great job of keeping up. Hasn't set a purple sector like the 2 front runners here, but is still very much in the mix, especially if there is any type of incident between the 2 at the front. Paul Millman is going to be in prime position to benefit as we get back onto the start-finish straight. Will Inglis trying to break the toe, of course. Everyone is allowed the DRS from the get-go here. Alex Smith looks to dart towards the inside, but he can't get past. We head through the first couple of corners with Will Inglis still in the lead. Alex Smith much stronger through the second part of that lap. That means that gap has now been closed up to only 0.3 of a second. The top 3 separated by a second and a half. The entire field separated by 4 seconds as we head deeper into this first sector here at Albert Park now. 0.4 now separating these drivers. The black carbon car of Will Inglis, reminiscent of the Mito Sarbelt, as we see Alex Smith. We saw him do it in race 1. Goes a little bit wide and off into the grass. He did that again at the same corner in race 2. That cost him precious tenth of a second. Of course, he doesn't need to worry about staying within DRS range, but he probably wants to stay within a slipstream range, because while he actually can use DRS at any moment in time, you still benefit a little bit from the slipstream from that car up in front, breaking your way through, punching through. That arguably removes some of the effects of the DRS, but any help aerodynamically down the straight, because of course these cars carry so much downforce despite their immense power. 0.8 of a second now between Alex Smith and Will Inglis as we head through the final couple of corners. 0.7 of a second now. Alex Smith is closing up. He was strong through the later part of the lap on the first lap, and he's demonstrating that strength on the second lap as well as we start the third. And it is still going to be a fight between Alex Smith and Will Inglis. Alex Smith just needs to try and keep the nose clean in order to fight Will Inglis. Good to see that no one here has had to dive into the pits immediately, although I shouldn't have said that, because commentator's curse will be in full effect now. As we can see, a bit of recovery being deployed there on Alex Smith's car to explain the cars a little bit more, to explain a little bit more what's going on in terms of energy systems. You've got the MGU-H and the MGU-K, just like a Formula 1 car. The MGU-H is pretty much working all the time. It recovers heat energy from the engine to convert it into electrical power. The MGU-K is energy harvested under braking to give you that little bit of boost to charge up the battery pack on these hybrid cars, to give you up to 160 horsepower of boost in maximum setting to go faster down the straights effectively. And you can tell how those systems are being deployed. You can see on the air intake, the rollover hoop, the highest point of the car where air is drawn into the engine and what keeps the driver safe in the event of a rollover. There is a green LED kind of bar, and what that does, that shows you when maximum overtake mode is in effect. So that is when the driver is deploying all the energy stored in the battery to get most power out of the car and to go as fast as possible. You can also see on the back of the car, on the diffuser, low down on the car, a red LED cluster. That shows when energy is being harvested. That means that the car is building up energy under braking. That might be compromising speed, because sometimes you can actually see it while accelerating, and that means that the engine is charging up its own battery, just like, say, a Toyota Prius or a new Alfa Romeo Tonale. plug-in hybrid. And we can see that there we see those red LEDs under braking. And that means that the car might be going a little bit slower than it otherwise could. So you've got plenty of LEDs to let you know what's going on in the car. These energy systems are complicated. Our drivers have been getting their heads around it. But if you are able to effectively deploy it, it can reap you massive rewards. And we're seeing that now with Alex Smith. 1/10 of a second separating him and the race leader, Will Inglis. Alex knows how to use that energy system. We're going to see it in full effect now as we head into the later part of the lap, one of the higher speed corners where it's gone so wrong for drivers in the past, but it looks to be going well here for Will Inglis at least, although Alex Smith has just set 2 of the fastest sectors we've seen all race. Purple sector in sector 1 and sector 2, half a second faster than his previous attempt. All of the action in this race so far is at the front end of the field. Paul Newman, Steve Knight still separated by only 3 seconds there. Paul Newman wasn't quite able to keep up that pace with the front runners, maybe thinking of preserving those tyres, those softer compound tyres, for a little bit later on into the race, which is probably for the best. So it's our C2 clad front runners here bringing all of the action. Actually, both drivers slower through that final sector. Potentially what that will be is both drivers using all of their energy systems. Maybe the battery's getting a little bit low here and they're having to harvest energy, recover some energy down that start finish straight, costing them time down the straight. Let's see that as we get back underway. That corner which has caught Alex Smith out in the past, perhaps his only Achilles heel so far this race weekend. He's still very close indeed to Will Inglis. He's been putting that pressure on for a good couple of laps now and will be putting that pressure on even more, but Will Inglis so far hasn't cracked under it. We saw in race 1, Will Inglis did have a couple of errors and that cost him in his race. Of course, he ended up in the pits and was pretty much out of it from the get-go. There we see Alex Smith with a slightly cheeky interpretation of track limits, trying his best to catch up to Will Inglis here. We watch on behind the barrier there, you just get a sense of just the amazing speed available from the incredible Formula Alpha cars here. Of course, Formula 1 machinery. Steve Knight and Paul Millman do trade positions. It's because Paul Millman's had a big off. He's lost his rear wing as well. That is not helping at all, and he's now running last in this race. But there is Alex Smith in the slipstream, gaining as we run down into that first corner. Has a brief sniff up the inside there. Nothing he can do. Has to stay behind now for a little while longer. One of the narrower parts of the track coming up. The next overtaking opportunity, though, is this one here into turn 3, but I suspect Alex Smith just a little bit too far back. Will Inglis has been great on the defence so far and has just had enough performance in his back pocket to keep Alex Smith behind. Going ahead later into this sector now, only 2/10 separating them this time around. Will Inglis has picked up the pace a little bit. That is Paul Millman into the pits. What a shame, his race basically coming to an end, but that certainly isn't the case for Alex Smith, who's now side by side with Will Inglis, the race leader, as we head into what is effectively the back straight on this circuit. It's not straight at all, but in this machinery, it might as well be. Very impressive pace there, and just like Carlos Sainz against Max Verstappen, it is Alex Smith around the outside there. Obviously, a little bit different to Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz, but around the outside and into the lead before the corner actually even presented itself. It's Alex Smith back in the lead of this race. Has Will Inglis cost himself? Did he maybe get a bit of a back-end snap oversteer like Max Verstappen did in the Formula 1 race of just a little while back? Or has he potentially fully depleted his energy recovery system? Sorry, his battery as well. Could he be down on power? That looks to be the case because his sector 3 time is it's like a case of hair and a tortoise almost in comparison to Alex Smith. He seems to be struggling for pace all of a sudden, does Will Inglis. What can he do though at this stage in the race? Now's his chance to kind of maybe recover some of that energy, back off a little bit, accept that Alex Smith has got the race lead, build up some energy into the battery, let the tyres get into a more comfortable window, let himself have a bit of a breather, and then charge as we enter the midway stage of this race. Let's see what he can do, because he's certainly out of this fight just yet. In fact, he certainly isn't. He's gaining through the first couple of sectors on the DRS then. He was actually slower through the first sector, but only by about 900ths of a second. Actually slow through the second as well, so he's gaining time. Alex Smith seems to be losing maybe some corner exit, I want to say, because he's doing a good job of keeping up, is Will Inglis. It's just, will he be able to catch up enough to get that overtake ready here? I suspect, of course, if we had a fully fledged DRS system like they do in the real world of Formula 1, he'd be right on his rear wing. These cars, of course, designed for DRS systems to be utilised, and we do, of course, have DRS, but we don't deploy it in the same way that the real world of Formula 1 does. We can't quite do that. Assetto doesn't quite have the capabilities to do so. I believe there are mods available, but it's one thing to have a mod running in a single-player client. Trying to get that to deploy on a multiplayer client can be a little bit tricky sometimes. So, not able to utilise a Formula 1 style DRS system, but DRS nonetheless to allow us to improve our lap times. More like qualifying effectively, just in the race as well, where of course in qualifying and practice, you're free to use your DRS as you please within DRS zones. We have that same system, it's just in the real world you're allowed to use it when you're within 1 second. We can use it whenever here in the AROC racing leagues. In terms of top speeds at this circuit, you are looking at around about 328 kilometers per hour. That was the case for Matt Daly, who was one of the fastest cars in a straight line. Corse not here with us for race 2, unfortunately, but at least he was able to take part earlier on. At 328 kilometers an hour, that's 204 miles an hour. That is one of the fastest parts. That is one of the high-speed tracks we visit, actually. So immense speeds here at Albert Park. These are very capable machines indeed. Very capable drivers as well. As I say that, Will Inglis has some issues heading through that penultimate corner, allowing Alex Smith to break away a little bit more. Paul Williams having issues as well. He's dropped back. He's had a collision with the environment once again, which means an impact with a barrier or something like that. He's lost his front wing now. Now not looking entirely comfortable in that car, it must be said. This is looking good though for a Steve Knight podium here. Wasn't able to jump onto the podium in the previous race. Now in with a shout of it as we head into the halfway stage of this second race, the reverse grid race here at Albert Park. With this now about 3.5 seconds down on Alex Smith. Alex Smith, who has just had remarkable pace all weekend, has been in control. Didn't actually win it in qualifying, and has actually just gone a little bit wide, as both Will Inglis and Paul Milner have had further issues. They do get underway though. Yeah, as we say, in terms of outright one-lap pace, it seems to me that Will Inglis just about has the measure, but Alex Smith seems to be in control so far this race weekend. And just like we talked about a few laps ago, just over 10 minutes ago in this race, and what we're now beginning to see is Willing Bliss, after a few laps kind of off the radar, has been able to bring that car into what looks to be a good window once again. Maybe has taken a few slightly easier laps, has burnt off a little bit more fuel load in the car, of course. Maybe he's feeling more ready to go now. The car probably feeling a little bit happier, the temperature's a little bit better, energy has been fully recovered. Maybe this is going at the same time Alex Smith has deployed some of his energy, because with the past couple of laps, and now it seems to be slightly disproved, so maybe not, Willing Bliss had a little bit more pace in the car and was closing the gap. Alex Smith appears to have seen that, appears to have responded now, but it's going to be a game of cat and mouse, I suspect, until the very end. 10 minutes to go. That puts us around about 5 more laps to complete, maybe 4. And yes, it's still not out of the question for Willing Bliss. He's still very much in this fight here, can still put the pressure on, can still utilise those energy systems effectively and try and bring it home. Well, he's going to bring it home with a good finish regardless, but whether or not he can still fight for that lead, it's not out of the question just yet. Although that being said, as I say, Alex Smith has just gone purple through the first sector at 26.5. He is absolutely flying along at the moment, is Alex Smith. Let's have a look at the championship standings after that first race this evening. So, no surprise there, Alex Smith extends his championship lead. Matt Daly is in fact classified, so gains a few points despite his DNF. But Alex Smith with 216 points to his name. Willing Bliss has jumped up into third in the running, has 122 points to his name. He is effectively, after this race especially, Alex Smith's nearest rival, 80 odd points down. In fact, what has happened to Alex Smith's car there? He's come to a complete stop. Oh my god, that is so... Has he run out of fuel? There's an engine failure or a lack of fuel. That's not a mechanical failure with his rig. That is something wrong with the car in game, and that effectively ends Alex Smith's charge to race victory here this evening. Willing Bliss, as I was saying, anything could happen. Yeah, he's still in the mix. Willing Bliss now leads this race. So that will bring Willing Bliss closer in terms of the championship standings. That will mean he surpasses Matt Daly fairly comfortably and actually gets a little bit closer to Alex Smith. This, of course, also promotes Steve Knight into second and Paul Millman eventually into third as well. This will hugely benefit their championship charges. Steve Knight currently in 7th. He should jump up to around about P5. Paul Millman should be jumping up to P3. Potentially, maybe P4. But either way, this is completely and utterly turned things on his head, ladies and gentlemen. Alex Smith is staring at me intently. He's just looking at me. That is an ominous sight. This is me in my little Alpha 75. Never before on a racetrack has an Alpha 75 and a Formula 1 car been this close together on track. The 75 is a lovely car, of course, but that is, I imagine, a very forlorn, a very angry Alex Smith just looking at the camera. I suppose that was probably his only thing, is that, well, how can I get some more airtime? Well, I'll have to go and find Reeve's eyes, because this is, of course, me. This is what I do. This is my commentary booth for the AROC Racing Leagues, and that is Alex Smith, ladies and gentlemen, running out of fuel or an engine failure. I suspect the first out of this race. What should have been a surefire thing. Now, if he stays in the pits, and even if DNFs, to be honest, we saw Matt Daly still classified in race 1. He should still get some points to his name, but it will be for P4. It's now Willing Bliss, Steve Knight, Paul Millman for the podium here. I don't think we've ever had a podium like it. Willing Bliss then just needs to cruise it home comfortably, and that's what I said about Alex Smith, but it didn't happen for Alex Smith. So let's see if Willing Bliss is able to do so now and just bring this car home. It was a pole in qualifying after all. Can he bring it home and take a race victory here at Albert Park? What an utter disaster for Alex Smith. With only 4 cars in the running, you'd think it's got to be easy pickings. He's actually boxed in the Alfa Romeo F1 team pit box there, which is a sad reminder of what used to be, hey, ladies and gentlemen. But we still got it here at least, and that's quite cathartic almost. Actually, that's, you know, the dead Formula 1 car pulling up outside the Alfa Romeo F1 pit box. Meanwhile, Jeff here is his arm's been very sore. In 4 years now, it's coming up to 4 years that I've been commentating on the AROC Racing Leagues. Let's call it 3. Poor Jeff, to my right here, has been holding that pit lollipop in that exact angle, in that exact position. That man deserves some compensation. I imagine injury laws for you will be on the case for that one. There we have some traffic lapping the now long forgotten Alex Smith. Welcome to the club, Alex. Your car enters the pit lane where racing cars come to die, pretty much. I mean, this 75 hasn't seen any track time in God knows how long. Poor Jeff here hasn't got to change a tyre in years. Well, he doesn't really. It's his job to be Lollipop Man. But yeah, hashtag justice for Jeff, everyone. Let's give Jeff some screen time, as well as some Alex. Alex has had plenty of screen time this evening, but he's getting a little bit more. 4 minutes to go in this race. Things have slightly gone off the rails, if I'm honest. But this race weekend has very much been off the rails. There is finally, for Will Inglis, some traffic for Paul Millman as well. Some racing action to be had. We're going to pretend it's for the lead of this race. Oh dear. We're not going to pretend it's for the lead of this race because the stewards wouldn't look very kindly at that one. There was a gap for a car there, just about. I think Will Inglis might have been a little bit hopeful, at least from our perspective, from where we saw it. A little bit hopeful to try and get the car to fit in there. Of course, it is the onus is on the car on the lead lap to get past the back markers safely. There's no such thing as a blue flag here. But luckily, no major ill effects from that small incident between Will Inglis and Paul Millman. Maybe it was a bit of a love tap to a reminder. You know, someone else is still here. There is still racing going on. 3 minutes to go in this race then, ladies and gentlemen. And that is the safe to play at this point in time. It is despair for Alex Smith. Revenge, perhaps, for Will Inglis. Paul Millman enjoying Demolition Derby with Will Inglis. And Steve Knight's plodding along in P2. That's kind of justice for Jeff. Justice for Jeff, ladies and gentlemen. Back underway, down the start-finish straight. 40 seconds now, that lead down to P2. Paul Millman, you imagine, must be slightly annoyed with himself. Earlier on, of course, had that issue that allowed Steve Knight to pass. And it means it's going to be P3 for Paul Millman, which on any other day would still be a good result. But Paul Millman knows that P2 was very much on the cards here. And for a second, it probably looked like P1 could have been on the cards, given how closely Will Inglis and Alex Smith were racing. We are now into the final couple of minutes of this race. And it hasn't been as easy as you would have expected for Will Inglis, that is for sure. You'd think with such an empty grid, maybe it would have been quite easy, but no. Alex Smith had some brilliant battles with him actually, and we do have news from Alex Smith. It is indeed an engine failure for Alex. It can happen. It happens in the world of Formula 1. Just think to Mercedes here in the previous Formula 1 race with a loss of oil pressure, the engine going into a fail-safe mode. It appears that the Ferrari power unit having the same struggle. And yes, thank you, Alex. Hashtag justice for Jeff. Spelt correctly as well. I'm glad I didn't even need to correct the spelling there. It is Jeff, pronounced Jeff. As Alex Smith remains in the pits with that engine failure. It's just 90 seconds left to go in what has been one of the slightly different running of the Formula Alpha series, shall we say. It's been more like a free practice session more than anything. Alex Smith on that previous lap was on for a bit of a fly by the looks of things. He was purple through that first sector. That safety tyre was clearly lasting well. We've got no one who's jumped onto the C5. We haven't had a mad rush for the pits early on this time round. But in terms of that C3 tyre, it seems to be the only real comparison that Paul Millman has is Steve Knight. It's a 26 on that last lap. Will Inglis currently lapping in the 22s, but we know he's had great pace. Less than a minute to go on the clock. But I think the C2 tyre was probably the optimal tyre to go for in the end. The C3 certainly has its virtues, especially given that everyone pitted in race 1. Alex Smith did actually drop onto that softer compound tyre and found himself in the 19th. And here we have now, it's going to be Will Inglis trying to lap Paul Millman once again as we dive back onto the start-finish straight in just a couple of corners. Just Sector 3 to negotiate. Sector 2 is deceptively short here at Albert Park. It pretty much just pertains what is effectively the back straight. It is crazy to think just how much the world of Formula 1 has moved on as we see Will Inglis having a look up the inside here. Paul Millman is politely leaving the door open for him, and very much aware of his presence. Maybe not. I'm going to backtrack on that statement. There's no front wing there now left for Will Inglis as we start this final lap of the race, but it is crazy to think just a couple of decades ago that corner would have been quite a challenge for old Formula 1 machinery, but now with the levels of downforce and levels of power that these ground effect era cars represent, it is effectively a back straight. You just go flat out round that left-hander. It's very easy indeed. So then heading through this final lap, he took victory in qualifying. Race 1 looked like a bit of a disaster, but race 2, it is certainly redemption for Will Inglis now. This gives him that little bit of kind of a spurring on, that little kind of extra spring in his step almost in this championship to still try and fight for it. It's a huge chasm between Will Inglis and Alex Smith in terms of the standings, but this just helps him out a little bit more as we head through the final corner onto the start-finish straight. It is Will Inglis takes victory in qualifying, of course, and will finally take race 2 victory as well. Congratulations, Will. An impressive drive here at Albert Park. Watching now with Steve Knight again. Steve Knight, usually in that lower midfield battle, we don't usually expect to see him in the mix for the podiums, fighting for those top steps in the championship standings, but it's been a bit of a season of attrition really, through strong attendance and through keeping the nose relatively clean. He's found himself in P2 in this race and will now be coming home with a huge haul of points ahead of Paul Millman, ahead of Alex Smith. Engine failure there, of course. It is Steve Knight who heads across the line in P2 in just a moment for a visit to the podium here. Now, I should mention, ladies and gentlemen, it did say final lap before. The timing system appears to have had a little bit of a glitch. Will Inglis is still going along at full chat, so this might actually still be a racing lap. Not sure what's gone on here. It's just been chaos through and through so far this weekend. There we're seeing Paul Millman just looking at that front axle. He's having to, that steering lock he's having to try and deploy in order to get that car to go around corners now. That C3 tyre is pretty much toast by the looks of things. Alex Smith is actually out back on track, I should mention. The checker flag has now finally flew. Now it's because Will Inglis has now actually come across the line, so apologies there, ladies and gentlemen. But it doesn't matter, the result doesn't change. Will Inglis comes home P1. Paul Millman is classified P3, rounding out the podium there. Returns to the pits as well. Alex Smith is actually back out on track. Will be classified P4 in the end. Steve Knight will be coming home P2 as well. So as we were saying, a great drive for him. Good haul of points there. And it should be a little bit of a boost for him heading later into this season. And we do now enter the final third of this season after this race. It has been... the time has absolutely flown by. But it is Steve Knight crossing the line here, and then Alex Smith, of course. Is Alex Smith trying to, is he just trying to prolong the stream, or has he had another engine failure? Because that is terrible luck if that is the case. Either way, I believe we have some victory donuts. Yes, we do. Thank you very much, Will, for providing the victory donuts. Look at those beautiful looking smoke effects there. Just goes to show you still do need a good graphic card for Assetto Corsa, because you run some mods and you can have some very pretty visuals indeed. So thank you, Will, for demonstrating those. And that is everyone back into the pit. And that is it for what has been an odd evening's worth of racing here at Albert Park. I hope you've enjoyed watching as much as I've enjoyed commentating. And I'm sure Alex Smith hasn't really enjoyed his power unit this evening. But that brings an end to the running here. So we'll catch you in a fortnight's time for the next Formula Alpha round. And in a week's time for the next touring car round as well. So thank you very much and a good night.